talking right now, we've been talking about it amongst ourselves, but we're also hearing from you about the Nancy Guthrie case. Where is it? Where does it stand? Is it ever going to get solved? Is this now case closed, cold case, and we'll hear something years from now? And you can't even imagine, we can't even imagine the suffering that her family is going through right now. But we brought in Arif Halaby. He's a law enforcement analyst. He's also a former LAPD investigator, to get some insight into this. Arif, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. This is a wild case. It's got an interesting timeline so far.
And then when you look at where it is now, which we don't really know where it is, but we know certainly there's been no arrest and there's been no return or discovery of Nancy Guthrie. What do you think are some of the main factors at play here?
Well, I think the initial main factor that's going to impact this case for its eternity is the inability to close that crime scene. Once the sheriff opened that crime scene, that changed everything, because now evidence is in question. You're going to have some contamination, and I think some good evidence was left and probably could never be recovered. And
that's something that a lot of people have talked about, because they opened up the house, which was basically in a case like that, and with your LAPD experience, and in a case like that, what would have been the normal protocol for a disappearance or what appeared to be an abduction in terms of the individual's, the victim's home?
Yeah, immediately you wouldn't allow the pool man to come or the gardener to come. They're blowing away evidence. They're cigarette butts, again, gloves. Maybe they were picked up and put in the trash by the gardeners or by blown into the neighbor's yard. These kinds of things were not acceptable. And so I think that's a big part of where this happened. What we would have done, in fact, if you were 3 days out of the police academy where I taught for a couple of years, if you were 3 days out of the academy, you knew better than the sheriff of that county that opened up that crime scene. You just don't do that. And I think he just was over his skis. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he just had more than he could handle, and didn't want to, out of pride or ego, give it up to the FBI, which he should have done right off the bat.
No, I was going to ask you about that, because there was the FBI wasn't brought in right away, and we were all sitting here, in our newsroom, going, wait a minute, this just doesn't make sense. They have so many resources, they have so much experience. Why not bring them in, especially in something like this that's so high profile? How much damage did that do to the investigation?
Well, that, in addition to sending it off to their own lab, remember, DNA degrades, meaning DNA, once you use a portion to test, that DNA is destroyed forever. So if you only have so much to work with, you really end up in a scenario where, if it's going to have multiple labs testing it, the amount of DNA that's available for testing starts to go away. And that can really damage, especially if it was the better DNA. Sometimes there's DNA that's less contaminated, and that's the one that they choose to use, and then that's gone forever, especially if it wasn't done correctly.
And then at this point in the case, this point, more than a month since she disappeared or was taken, what kinds of developments would have to happen to give investigators a chance at a real breakthrough here?
Well, there's two things that are happening at once. The family is doing things on their side. Savannah is doing very well by going out and trying to keep this in front of the media, increasing the reward to $1 million. They should have done that right off the bat, in my opinion. $20,000, $50,000, that's a joke with this kind of a high-profile case, especially when they were trying to do Bitcoin for $70,000 or $60,000. The reason you do that is you call their bluff. Right. And you say, all right, okay, guys, I get it. You're kidnapping. You didn't know what you had, maybe. Go ahead and send it off. Now, the FBI has pulled Google searches in the area, and not once but twice had people Googled what Savannah's net worth was. But that's it. 2 people in all that area in Google. Now, I don't know. I don't necessarily go out and Google the net worth of celebrities often. So somebody cared about this. And then the other part of it was very simple. There was one time somebody Googled where Nancy Guthrie lived. So we now have those Google searches. And if that continues to develop, hopefully it does, maybe that's a lead that they're still working on.
And then it's interesting you said that about the reward, because I found that very odd too. You're talking about somebody with tremendous financial resources. That's your mother. What would be the reasoning behind not putting money out there, like a substantial reward out there in public right from the get-go, to at least get phone calls? And if it's too much for law enforcement, or the FBI says we're going to get flooded, then I'm sure there's private, there have to be like private investigative agencies that could at least handle and log them or whatever. I don't know. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right, exactly. And part of that reward drives people to the phones, and of course can overwhelm FBI. But that's okay. That's what they're there for. They have a process of filtering out the wackos from the normal folks, and maybe legitimate things that people didn't even realize were real serious clues. Here's another part. Look, there's a private management service. Every famous or wealthy person or somebody that's out there, they have the ability to have a team on standby, and certainly NBC does, for crisis management. Publicists have these people on their speed dial. They're out there, managers, etc. No matter what happens, you get caught in some sort of a scandal. And in doing so, they should have come on board right away. I think they ran a parallel investigation. I think Savannah and her family and the police, local police, followed a set of advice from somebody, and it was probably not the correct advice, and now we know it to be probably the case.
Anything else we should be watching for with this in the days ahead?
Take a look at some of the electronic surveillance. I brought this up early on, and I've not heard anybody else talk about it. So I'll bring it up here, and I think you're going to find this as a very important part. A lot of the vehicles in that area are electric vehicles with cameras. Remember the Teslas, when people were vandalizing the Teslas, when the left-wing guys didn't like Elon Musk. Those cameras run 24/7. So there are parking lots that have those cameras. There's people's driveways that have the rear camera. So I don't think we're seeing everything. I think the cameras that are still yet to go through all of that filtering throughout that area.
And that was the other thing that seemed to, I mean, when we saw the actual shots, the images of the neighborhood, of what it looked like with the brush, how far apart the houses were, that they supposedly didn't want street lights because of light pollution at the foothills there, all of these types of things. But if there was any vehicle there, you would think that at a certain point, a vehicle coming in or out, especially when there's not that much traffic, it's not like New York or LA, if there's not that much traffic, that there would have been a traffic camera somewhere, at least on whatever's the main street that feeds to.
Yeah, there's about 50 various digital cameras. 7 of them for sure are high definition, so we know that in that area. Here's another part. You had mentioned, what else might we know? I think we're forgetting that the way the suspect handled the flashlight in his mouth, he turned it off and on at ease, even though his hands were available. So it wasn't as if you and I fumbling around and we just put something in our mouth to hold it for a minute. He was very adept to handling the flashlight, and in doing so, had the ability to turn it off and on with his tongue and his mouth. And that led, in my opinion, to him probably being something in a mechanic world or manufacturing, either as an avocation or that's his job, because that's the way mechanics handle it, and that would be in line with the type of gloves that